Well, Danny, I see you're at home. Are you working hard or hardly working?
I'm working hard always. Always.
Likely story.
My laptop is open.
And you're not just using some tech to toggle the mouse. You're actually working over there?
Yeah, I've got docs open, spreadsheets. I'm editing them.
Well, look at that. Hello and welcome to Not Another Business Podcast, where we break down business news and cultural events according to rules we've entirely made up. I'm KJ Miller, ex-corporate consultant and current CEO and co-founder of Minted Cosmetics.
And I'm Daniela Dektar McCarthy, ex corporate lawyer and current general counsel at Ness. And fun fact, KJ and I have been friends since our Harvard a cappella days because we are that cool, folks. Disclaimer, I start every episode with this. The views we express today are our own and not those of our companies. Today on the show, bosses. Don't you hate a boss?
I hope not.
Bosses everywhere are demanding that employees get back to the office, butts in seats, and folks aren't happy about it.
Folks are not happy about it. And I got to tell you, this is one of the wildest business trends that I think we are seeing right now because I have not seen one company, not one CEO, give an evidence backed reason for why people need to show up to the office. But people are doing it anyway. And we've got to talk about it because, like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I think there's an underlying question just about how legitimate is this call because it is happening everywhere. So if everyone's doing it, maybe you think there's got to be something, or is it just some giant cabal?
I think there are people who have their own reasons, their own selfish reasons for wanting to be back in the office. And they are using this moment and this momentum because other people are doing it to force it to happen. And we'll get into it, but I think there might be some nefarious things at play here. But I'm excited to get into it more right after our shameless plug. All right, Danny, what are you plugging this week?
I am plugging the Nest card and the new referral program that we just launched. As of today, if you are a Nest card member and you refer a friend, each of you can earn up to 5,000 Nest points when your friend applies, gets approved, and makes their first transaction. And you can do this up to once a month. So get your card, refer a friend, get some Nest points, and take care of yourself and put some energy towards your health and wellness with the Nest card.
Love it.
How about you, KJ? What are you plugging?
Well, once again, I'm going to plug this very podcast that you and I are hosting right now. I just wanted to let people know, because we didn't actually tell anyone, that we are now on social. So we did this weeks ago and we didn't tell anyone about it. We're on YouTube.
It's a slow burn.
Slow burn. We're on YouTube. If you would like to actually watch us while we chit chat and not just listen to us, you can find us Not Another Business Podcast on YouTube. If you would like to see just like some clips here and there, our quick takes, head over to TikTok. It is Not Another Business Pod. We couldn't get the whole phrase in there, not enough characters. So it's Not Another Business Pod on TikTok. Or if you just want to drop me and Danny a line, you want to say, hey, we love the show. It's Not Another Business Podcast at gmail.com. So reach out, watch us on YouTube, follow us on TikTok, do all the things. We love hearing from you. We love interacting with you. So we can't wait to do that. And with that, let's get back to the show. All right, guys, guess what? It's time for a new segment alert. New segment alert. Pew, pew, pew.
Pew, pew, pew.
We're calling this one Flashback Friday, and we're going to use this time to look back on a prior episode in case there are some interesting updates and juicy tidbits for us to dive into. And as you guys know, I love juicy tidbits.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Who
You want a
doesn't?
dry tidbit? No. Juicy tidbits only. All right, this time we're taking a trip down memory lane to our Netflix episode, aptly titled When Netflix Chose Violence. Because Netflix, and in fact all of the streamers, are catching a lot of heat right now from TV writers. The Writers Guild of America, which is the union that TV and film writers belong to, may be going on strike. Why, you ask? Because the residuals they get paid when their work goes to Netflix or other streamers is just a fraction of what it was when their shows re-aired on cable. According to Brittany Nichols, a writer for Abbott Elementary, a critically acclaimed show, for those of you who haven't seen it, check it out. When her show re-airs on cable, she gets a check for $13,500. You could do something with that kind of money. When it sells to a streamer, she makes $700. So, pretty healthy difference.
Mm-hmm.
KJ, what is your take on all this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say I did do some investigative journalism on this topic. I texted a good friend of mine who is, in fact.
Oh, I was going to ask if you texted her. I was like, we have to. Yeah. Okay, good.
A good friend of mine who is, in fact, a TV writer, just because I wanted to vet these numbers and make sure I was understanding them clearly. So, from what she told me and our understanding, it is the $13,500 that Brittany Nichols cites. That is typical for a check you would get each time an episode re-airs. Okay, so every single time it re-airs on any network, and if it goes into syndication, you're still getting that check, right? The $700. This is what my question was: is that $700 like that's a one-time thing, and then the streamer can run it forever and ever? Amen.
In perpetuity, yeah.
Right. And what my good friend clarified for me is no. Typically, you're paid a certain amount for a certain time period. So Brittany Nichols in this clip that I saw did not specify what time period that was, but typically, my friend said you are paid either for a quarter, right, or for a year. So that $700 could mean that, if it was sold to Hulu, she got $700 for Hulu to run it for the next 3 months, or she got $700 for Hulu to run it for the next year. We don't know, but either way, obviously much, 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 much less than the $13,500. Okay, so my thought here is 100% that is unfair. I mean, that is insane. I do believe that writers, if they can't come to an agreement, and by the way, they have until May, their current contract goes up in May. So if they can't come to an agreement by May, they most likely will be going on strike. I think if they can't come to an agreement on upping these residuals for streamers, they should go on strike, because that's ridiculous. This is their life's work. And another point that I saw another writer make was, you have writers now making less 10 years into their career than they were making when they were 3 years, 4 years in. That's not how it should work in any industry, right? Like, you are more experienced, you are better at what you do, but because your work is being sold to these streamers, you're making less than you were before. And I don't think that that's right. I do think part of the reason this is happening is because, as we spoke about on our Netflix episode, you have so many streamers, there's so much competition, they have to make so much content that they are just pumping it out, right? And so everything goes to streaming, and that means everything is making less money. They have less money to give to each individual writer's room. I also read part of the problem with strikes is these streamers are putting together what they're calling mini rooms, which means, your typical writer's room might have 7, 8, 9 people. They're putting 2 people in a room and saying, spit out a hit, right? Because they don't want to pay as much. So just all in all, I'm not an industry expert. I'm sure there's much more we could go into more deeply. We could probably do a whole other episode on it. But my quick take is I absolutely think these writers should be making more. We are all loving and living for this content. It's how most of us spend our evenings, and they should be getting paid for that. That's my thought. What about you?
Yeah, I think my reaction is that there has to be a way to approximate how successful a show is once it reaches a streaming network,
right,
and to compensate someone accordingly, right?
Yes.
Like, on cable, there's a limited number of networks and there's a limited number of slots, right? Like, you're limited to 24 hours in a day,
yes,
right? So the writers of Friends are killing it because Friends is on I don't know how many networks every single day.
right.
Like, there has to be an equivalent to number of impressions, number of views on these streamer sites. Like, it seems like that should be factored in, such that shows that end up in streaming networks that are watched all the time,
right,
those writers should get paid more.
Yeah.
I do like the idea that streaming networks make it so that some people who would have gotten $0 in residuals because their show never would have been picked up for syndication get something.
Right.
Like, that sounds like a potential positive, just the access that streaming networks provide,
Yeah.
right? and at a lower cost, right? Because people are paying less for those streaming services than for cable. So your show later on can still has the potential to reach a broader audience. Like that's a positive. But it does seem like it shouldn't just be a flat number and one that's just tied to the time period in which it's on a network as opposed to the amount it's being accessed when it's on the streaming network.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good point. You know, particularly you think about a lot of people credit Netflix with how much more popular The Office got after it stopped running.
Right.
Because, you know,
it was like a cult classic.
Yeah, it was a cult classic. You had the people who loved it, but because it streamed on Netflix for years, it was Netflix's #1 streaming show, like by far, right? Like billions of hours were spent watching that show on Netflix. So the writers of The Office should definitely have made much more money than whatever little rinky-dink other show from Fox made it up on Netflix, right? And it sounds like to me right now that is not being taken into account. And like you said, it absolutely should be. So I hope they reach a resolution, because I do think if they go on strike, you know, fans are probably going to feel it. There's going to be a little bit of a dearth of content, at least on some platforms. But you got to pay people what they're worth.
Absolutely. Hope the union has a good set of lawyers. All right, so on to our main topic. KJ, hiss with the facts. You and I are still working remotely and happy to be doing so, but it sounds like that's not the case for a whole lot of people.
Yes. So I will kick off the facts with some very important stats as reported by Zippia. Zippia is a job posting site, and they have a lot of stats posted on their site. You can just head on over there and read them for yourselves, but here are two that I find very interesting. Number one, 84% of employers say the transition to remote work has been successful. Okay. Number two, 63% of employees prefer remote work. Okay. And number three, this is actually from a Gallup study. A Gallup study found that 91% of workers want to maintain some level of remote work, with 54% preferring hybrid, 37% preferring full remote. All right. So right off the bat, it's looking to me like remote work is working. Employers say they've seen it, they've transitioned to this successfully. Employees say they like it, they want it to stay, they prefer it. So to me, it looks like based on the data, it's working. And I think this is very much in line with what most of us have seen and experienced in the 3 years since the pandemic started. People are still productive, work is getting done, revenue is being made. People are analyzing the data on the spreadsheets, so on and so forth. I think most of us can say we did not see some huge drop off in productivity and results upon transitioning to remote, right?
Right.
Despite this, employers are giving remote work a very heavy makeover. So according to Forbes, 50% of leaders are forcing their teams to return to the office full-time. 50% of leaders we're forcing return to office full-time. And according to another job search website at Zuna, employers are becoming firmer on their return to work policies. So they said, looking at their data of, job postings, the proportion of roles specifying that they are office-based has risen to a 19-month high of 4.2%. So
would that include hybrid? Is a hybrid role office-based, or is office-based full-time?
I think office-based means full-time.
Okay.
I think that means, because I think otherwise you would specify it as hybrid.
Okay, got it.
The other thing is we are seeing some really big name, well-known firms issue really strong mandates for a return to office. So yes, across the board, you're seeing, 50% of leaders decide that they want their people back in the office full-time. But also sort of leading this charge are the big guys. So, for example, Goldman Sachs demanded back in March of 2022, so March of last year, that employees return to office 5 days a week, right? So they sort of like came out hot, right? We were barely out of Omicron, okay? People were still sick with Omicron, okay? And Goldman said, we don't care. get yourselves back here literally 5 days a week and work Goldman hours. We all know at Goldman, they're not in there 9 to 5. Okay. They are there 7 to 7, 7 to midnight. They said, come back. All right. JP Morgan shortly thereafter followed suit, demanding managers and senior managers to be in the office 5 days a week. And they also recently broke ground on a new headquarters in NYC. Okay, so they are doubling, tripling down. They said, not only are you coming back, we're building a new office for you to come back to. And since then, we've seen many other companies, big companies that previously hailed remote work started changing their tune, right? So Disney previously said, we believe in remote work. It's working for us. Now everybody got to come back. Salesforce CEO has gone on record saying, I don't think this remote thing is working. Y'all got to come back. Obviously, Twitter with Elon Musk and his crazy self has said everybody has to be back. And, we're all about hustle culture, grind set. Y'all got to be in here, work hard, blah, blah, blah. So it's getting crazy, right? And the thing is, it's looking like most companies are doing a hybrid work setup. But we're also seeing some companies really struggle to find the right balance. So, for instance, Amazon. In 2021, Bezos said employees need to return. This was April 2021. Employees would need to return to the office full-time in the fall. So in April, he was like, by the fall, everybody's got to be back. But then changed course. Omicron and all those other variants started popping up. They changed course and decided to opt for a hybrid scheme that allowed employees to work from home 2 days per week. Then in October 2021, they ditched that plan and announced it was no longer a requirement for corporate workers to return to office. But then in February of this year, their new CEO, Andy Jassy, wrote that employees should go back to being in the office together the majority of the time. And now it is expected that Amazon employees will be in their headquarters at least 3 days per week. And you've sort of seen this dance at a number of companies like, oh, remote is okay. Actually, it's going to be hybrid. It needs to be 2 days a week. We think it should be 4 days a week. We're going to pull back on that because, the COVID is back. But now that COVID is over, they can't seem to get it right. And employees are being strung along and sort of shaken around trying to figure out, do I have to be there? Don't I have to be there? And if I do have to be there, why?
When I was at, so some people might not know, before I came to Ness, I was at Wells Fargo. Very different type of company. I joined Wells Fargo in December of 2020, so very much a fully remote role. And I was not there for a very long time, only 9 months. In those 9 months, the number of times the Wells Fargo executive team announced a return to office and then delayed that return to office.
Yes.
And then said, we're not actually sure. And then said, no, we are sure this is the date. And then said, we're going to delay that date. And then said, we're not, you see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going? Okay. 100%. It was, and I don't think that they're fully back in the office yet. It was such a struggle. Also, it was coupled with this push to have, because Wells Fargo was previously a super distributed company, a push to have people in clear hubs. So it was coupled with this actual reduction in the workforce, particularly of people who are not near a main office. And it was so messy and so confusing. And I just think, especially the big companies that have massive workforces, they have not done this well.
Right. Well, what's so interesting is I remember in 2020, 2021, when we all were remote, but we all sort of didn't know, will things go back? What will it be? A lot of things that I was hearing on the startup front, and in my various CEO founder lists was everyone was surveying their team, right? That was the buzz. Everyone's surveying the team. Everyone's talking to the team, taking the temperature, getting the pulse, all those other buzzwords. And we did the same. So I surveyed my team and, I think we've talked about this before, maybe during the 4-day work week episode or maybe during the quiet quitting episode. But what I heard across the board was people who were a little bit older, in their 30s, were like, I want to be remote. Okay. I don't need to do the office. I've done the office, been there, done that. And my employees who were younger, like, more straight out of college, were like, well, I would like to do a hybrid thing. But keep in mind, my company's small. I didn't have that many people in their 20s, right? So at that time, maybe I had eight, there were maybe 8 of us. That's like 2 folks, right? So two out of 8 are like, I would love to do a hybrid thing, but everybody else is like, I really don't want to be in the office anymore. And, including me, I was like, and I don't want to be in the office anymore. So we made the decision to go fully remote. We let go of our lease. But I will say, even when I was sort of kind of trying to consider what a hybrid scenario would look like, and this gets to this like back and forth and, this back and forth game that a lot of companies are going through, I think it is much harder to try and do a hybrid thing. I think like... And I think that is probably why you're seeing some of these CEOs start to move in the direction of like just full time. Because if we say hybrid, that means different things to every single person, right? Mm-hmm. And what I have found most people want when you say hybrid is, I would like to come in when I want to come in. Okay, well, when I want to come in might not be when you want to come in.
Right.
But so now I just have a random assortment of people in the office on any given day. So, right, on any given day, a random assortment. I might have 2 folks from HR, 5 folks from marketing, 3 folks from legal. What can this assortment of people do together? Literally nothing. Okay, so that means you're still on Zoom all day, right? Because half of your team did not choose Tuesday to come in. So now what are we doing? Now we're just all assholes in a conference room on Zoom. We look like assholes, okay? This is insanity. So that's part of the reason I was like, I can't make that make sense, right? Like, first of all, only 2 of you want to do this. Second of all, I know because you've told me you want to come in when you want to come in.
Right.
I can't make that work. It's much easier for me to say, let's just be fully remote. And I think some of these CEOs are struggling with that because when people say hybrid and you've got a random collection of folks on any given day, it just starts to look a little messy. So anyway, companies have not had the easiest time nor the most cohesive and coherent time with this transition to going back to the office. But they're announcing it and forcing people in anyway.
And so, okay, how are employees taking the forced return?
Mm-hmm. Well, generally speaking, not well is how I'd start. So when Amazon, for example, announced their return to office policy, whatever iteration, variation of it we're on, 14,000 employees joined a Slack channel. I cannot even fathom a Slack channel with that many people. 14,000 employees joined a Slack channel dedicated to protesting the decision. So they organized and got together and created a little petition, sent a letter to the CEO asking for the policy to just be straight up canceled. Like, just cancel this. This is nonsense. Okay. 14,000 folks. Similarly, over at Disney, after Bob Iger announced the return to office policy, you had over 2,000 employees sign a petition arguing that the change would force some employees from vulnerable communities and those who are hard to replace, these are their words, to resign and will significantly reduce productivity, output, and efficiency. So I'm quoting here from the petition. This policy will slow or even reverse our post-COVID recovery and growth by creating critical resource shortages and causing irreplaceable institutional knowledge loss. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, which I think is a perfectly good point. So across the board, you're really seeing employees fight against these return to office mandates, and which I think makes sense if we return to some of the stats we started the episode with. Almost 70% of Americans preferring to work remote versus in person, according to Zippia. And again, according to that Gallup poll, 91% preferring either fully remote or some sort of hybrid. So it makes sense that you're seeing people really, really push up against these mandates.
I do want to push on these facts a little bit because 14,000 employees joining a Slack channel does seem like quite a bit, but Amazon is huge, right? Like Amazon has, I just checked the numbers quickly, 1.1 million employees in the US, right? And I didn't check Disney's, but Disney also has a huge number. So is that so many employees who are furious?
Well, but how many of Amazon's 1.1 million employees work in their headquarters?
That's fair. That's fair.
I think it's under 100,000.
Let's
I
see.
guess we should look.
Let's see if we can look this up. 75,000, according to Amazon.
Okay, so 75,000.
That's actually a pretty big percentage.
That's a pretty big percentage.
Especially that if you think about the number of people who probably don't want to sign it because they don't want to have any kind of retaliatory action taken against them. So actually, that's pretty big.
I would say that is pretty big. And the thing is, I mean, the reason to me this all gets so interesting is because why are people asking us to come back to the office, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, since the pandemic, a lot of companies, including Amazon, saw record growth, right? Record growth. So you can't make the argument that you're not being productive, right? You can't make the argument that suddenly everyone went remote and profits tanked. We saw these companies succeed in the pandemic. We saw what people can do remotely. You're asking them, forcing them to come back anyway, right?
Yeah, well, the argument would have to be that, yes, we saw like record profits in the pandemic, but that was because we had an unusual situation that just totally changed consumer behavior. And if we were in the office, we would have done even better, right? Like that's what it has to be, something like that.
I mean, so look, let's just talk about what these leaders have said.
Okay, I was going to say, so what are they saying?
Let's talk about what they've said. So Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff told employees in a Slack message that the company's newest hires aren't being productive enough. Now, he did not quantify what enough meant, but he said they aren't being productive enough and suggested this was because they weren't building tribal knowledge with new employees without an office culture. Okay, now I would posit, without any real data, that just sounds like conjecture, but fine. Then you had Mark Zuckerberg over at Facebook. He also claimed that productivity suffers at home. So he pointed to internal data analysis. By the way, he did not share that internal data analysis. So for all we know, smoke and mirrors, but he pointed to internal data analysis that suggests engineers who initially joined the company in an in-person capacity performed better than those who joined remotely from the get-go. Now, again, to me, if you actually read a lot of the articles that have come out about Facebook since they've done these mass layoffs, there are a ton of people who have said they did not have anything to do at Facebook because they overhired. They essentially just like they were in growth mode. They hired thousands and thousands and thousands of people over the last 2-3 years in the pandemic, and a lot of them didn't have anything to do. So can you turn around and call that person unproductive
because they were not remote? Like, yeah.
Right. You didn't have anything for them to do. You essentially were scooping up talent with the hope of growth. And now that growth hasn't come and you don't need that talent, you're saying they're less productive? Like, to me, smells like bullshit. Okay. And I would just say the counterpoint to both of these arguments and whatever little data it is they are looking at is that multiple studies have shown productivity increased during the pandemic when we were all working from home. So a study by Stanford came out in 2021, I believe, of 16,000 workers over 9 months. And according to that study, working from home increased productivity by 13%. Okay? This isn't Mark Zuckerberg's little internal data that nobody can look at. This is Stanford's published study over 9 months with 16,000 workers. Also, according to Forbes, workers with full schedule flexibility report 29% higher productivity and 53% greater ability to focus than workers with no ability to shift their schedule. Now, you could say this is self-reported data, but at the end of the day, like, who is best at understanding whether or not they are being as productive they can than you yourself, right? So I think you maybe can take off a couple points for it being self-reported, but at the same time, I think I am the best judge of when I am most productive and when I'm not most productive. And so according to this study by Forbes, workers say when they've got a flexible schedule, their productivity is increased 29%. And then I think we also have to look at how did these companies actually perform? while everybody has been, as I stated before.
I'm glad we're getting into this because this is what my mom would be like. Come on, Danny, report the numbers.
Okay, so
here you go, Mom.
Let's look at the numbers. Goldman Sachs, which I'll remind you, has said everybody's got to be back in the office 5 days a week. Their stock price is up 70% since April 2020. Okay, 70%. All right. JP Morgan up 37% since April 2020. Salesforce up 24% since April 2020. All right, so these guys are not hurting. They are not hurting. They are doing very well, despite the fact that everybody was working from home. Now, I will also cite Disney here. To be fair, Disney stock, it sailed between 2020 and 2021, right? And it increased 43%. Recently, it's come down a bit. So it is currently down 7% to April 2020. But I'll also add, they recently announced a 4-day return to office policy. So maybe the two things are related. I don't know. It might be a coincidence. Yeah. But there you have it. So, I mean, just by and large, there's so much data to back up the idea that people are not less productive at home. And in fact, in many cases, are more productive at home. Yet you've got all of these CEOs demanding people come back to the office.
Okay, so the math isn't mathing, as the kids would say, right?
That is a thing the kids say, Danny.
So then what's happening? Let's move into speculation. What do you think is going on here?
Well, as you may have guessed.
Do you have strong feelings about this?
I have strong feelings about this, okay? And I will just say, I think there are a couple broader things going on here. So I'm going to put these into two groups, okay? And this is just my speculation. You might have many, many groups for your speculation. But for my speculation, I got two groups here. Group one is sort of a handful of explanations that, while to me are not super convincing, I at least understand. Like, I can empathize with them. I understand that group of explanations. Then group two is what I think is really, really going on. I think this is much more insidious, but I think it's the truth of what's happening here. Okay? That's how I'm thinking about it.
I'm nervous / excited for group two, but I guess let's go to the group one.
Yeah. Let's start with group one, okay? We'll ease them in here. So, first of all, I will say, it does seem like a big part of the issue here is just a lack of trust from managers to their teams, that their teams are actually doing what they say they're doing. And in fact, Microsoft released a study on this where they found that 85% of leaders say that the shift to hybrid work has made it challenging to have confidence that employees are being productive. So this lack of trust in worker productivity has led to what Microsoft researchers are calling productivity paranoia, where leaders essentially fear that lost productivity is due to employees not working, even though hours worked, number of meetings, and other metrics have increased. So essentially, it's like, if I can't see it, I don't believe it. And to me, I can at least empathize with that, because as a CEO, as a manager, I used to feel this way. So Amanda and I, pre-pandemic, we were very much an in-office culture. Not only did we not let our team work from home, I mean, obviously if you had a doctor's appointment or something, but generally speaking, we did not let people work from home. We didn't even let our interns work from home. Like, if you were an intern, you had to come into the office, okay? And we were very adamant that, Minted culture is an in-person culture. Products matter. You have to be in here and feel the products and blah, blah, blah. Okay. We were, and so I get it. I empathize with it. I used to be the same way. It's I need to be here with you, seeing you seeing me, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, the pandemic was like a reset button for all of us, right? Where we all got to understand what is and maybe isn't possible with us all working from home. And to not take that opportunity to really rethink your mindset when you've been handed what I think in some ways, not as it relates to public health, but as it relates to work, in some ways a gift, to understand that there are different ways of working that can work, to just turn your back on that, to me just feels so short-sighted and really, in some ways ignorant.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like, and this is a theme for me in general, but with respect to this point in particular, it feels a little bit like managers aren't understanding or aren't making the effort to say to themselves, what would I need other than in-person time to be more confident? Like what processes, mechanisms, type of documentation, whatever it is, could I put in place to have as much confidence in my team's productivity as I did before?
Yeah.
Because I think if managers sat down and thought about it, they'd probably come up with something that would make them feel pretty good.
Right.
Right?
Well, and I guess what also is so tough for me about this is, the way I have confidence around the fact that my team is working is stuff gets done when it's supposed to get done. And when the stuff doesn't get done when it's supposed to get done, we talk about that. And if that happens too often, like those folks don't make it. Right.
Right.
But that was true before too. Like I wasn't, yes, we were all in the office, but I wasn't standing over each person's shoulder watching them get their work done. And in fact, I remember it always made me feel very, very awkward when I would like come out of my office and see someone like on BuzzFeed and they would notice me and feel like they had to like not be on BuzzFeed anymore.
Right.
That made me feel very awkward because like be on BuzzFeed, right? If you need to take a minute or 10 minutes or whatever and be on BuzzFeed, please do. Don't let me be the reason why you're not doing that. Like that always made me feel really awkward. And so now I don't have to do that. I don't have to come out and see that you took a 30-minute break in the middle of the day to watch some Real Housewives. I don't care. I literally don't care. I would rather not know versus like know and have you feel bad that I know and have me feel bad that you feel bad. I don't want that. Okay. If you can get everything you need to get done and watch Real Housewives in the middle of the day, be my guest. And I like that now I am free from that and you are freed from that. And I think there are managers out there who just really want to know that you are spending every minute between the hours of 9 and 5 working and somehow feel robbed if you aren't. And I just cannot relate. I can't relate to that.
Well, let me ask, how did you, was there a transition period for you once the pandemic forced us all remote from being the person who really valued the in-person time to being a manager who thought, I actually don't really need this?
Yeah. Well, yes, I would say a couple things happened for me that shifted this for me. Because in the beginning, I was very depressed because I'm an extrovert. I love people. And so in the beginning, it was like, oh God, this is depressing. I'm literally in my office all day by myself. But two things helped shift this. One is when my co-founder resigned, mm-hmm. I realized I really like being around her. Like she and I are good friends. And so, I would pop out of my office and pop into her office and kiki, and that was a lot of fun. Okay. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yes, I did some kikiing with the team, but not on the same level, like I can't because I'm their boss.
Right.
So her resigning meant like that wasn't going to happen anymore anyway. Right. And she stepped down in the middle of the pandemic. That was one thing. And I would say the second thing is like I got comfortable with having more flexibility in my schedule such that I could sometimes say like, I'm going to have lunch with Kadar today, like our schedules sort of sync up and I can do that. Or I can. Remember, I bought a keyboard in the middle of the pandemic.
I forgot about this. Yeah.
Yeah. I sort of started teaching myself to play different songs and stuff, like as a break. And I then got used to and accustomed to this idea of flexibility that it just had never even crossed my mind before that I could do that. And that became just like very, very valuable to me. So those two things helped me get over the thinking that like I needed to be in person all the time. What about you? What was that transition like for you? Because you're an extrovert too, right? Or do I just tell myself that?
I think I'm I'm not as extroverted as you are. I could hole up and be fine for a while.
No.
No, you're very extroverted.
Yeah.
I need contact, but I'm good with contact from the same 3 people,
mm-hmm.
So Tom, Asher, let's say 4 people, my sisters, and then right. I don't really need to see anyone else. Mm-hmm. I still sometimes think I miss the office. Like I
Mm-hmm.
do miss seeing different people.
Mm-hmm.
But the ability to do other things in my day, as you said, not I didn't teach myself how to play certain songs on the piano, but like go to the gym or go food shopping if I missed it over the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
I think was really valuable. Also for me, actually, I'm the example of why some working from home has probably increased productivity. I work more. Like I like not having to commute. I can get stuff done during that commuting hour, like work
Right.
done during that commuting hour.
Right.
So, um, yeah, I think I like the shift for that reason. I would be somebody who would be pro hybrid.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't make sense for Ness, but we're fully remote, super distributed, no
Mm-hmm.
plans of creating hubs or coming to one single city. And I think there's a lot of value in being able to hire talent across the country. So I think that's
Absolutely.
what made sense for Ness and what will continue to make sense for Ness. But I think I would be somebody who, if I ever moved on to a different company, which I have no plans to do, but if I ever did, and it was like a New York based company going into the office, um, a few days a week, but it can't be the way that we said initially, not the asshole way, like the everyone comes in on a certain number of days so that we
Mm-hmm.
actually get the value out of human contact.
Right.
Um, that might make sense for me, but fully remote, that would be hard. That would be hard. All right, let's come back to the plot, which is
Mm-hmm.
the rest of group one.
Yes, the rest of group one. Okay, so the other explanation I would put into group one revolves around the idea of soft work. Now, are you familiar with this concept, soft work?
Is this like no, go ahead. You tell me. I was about to make a guess and be like, the
You
soft
know.
things around your word. Okay,
Okay,
go
yeah.
ahead.
All right, so there's a really great article in The Atlantic, and this actually came out years ago, about the concept of soft work. So the title of the article, if anyone wants to go read it, is Hard Work Isn't the Point of the Office. And the article essentially argues that hard work, i.e., all of the actual tasks for your job, so, data analysis, checking your email, deck building, research, all the actual
Mm-hmm,
things that have to get done for your job, those can be done just as well from home
mm-hmm,
as they can from an office. And I think, we've now talked about it ad nauseum. We've proven that. But soft work is a concept around all the other things that we would do in the office that made us form bonds with our team, right?
mm-hmm,
So things like chit chatting, things like having lunch together, grabbing coffee, asking about their weekend, you know, being around the water cooler, all of that stuff, right? Those are the things you miss out on when
mm-hmm,
you work from home. You don't get the
mm-hmm,
soft work. You get the hard work, you don't get the soft work. And so the author argues that the soft work is actually extremely important when it comes to fostering collaboration. And obviously, collaboration is important on any team. He also cites a paper out of UC Berkeley that studied the effect of the first 6 months of the pandemic on 61,000 Microsoft employees. And that paper said that remote work caused collaboration to be more static and siloed,
mm-hmm,
and noted a sharp decrease in communication across groups that made it harder for employees to acquire and share new information. Now, this as an explanation absolutely makes sense to me and absolutely resonates with me. And in
mm-hmm,
fact, this is the reason I read this article is a big part of the reason I started doing my quarterly all hands with my team. And at our
mm-hmm.
very first one, which happened November 2021, that was our very first all hands. We did basically a case study, a case discussion of this article, and talked about how can we as a team make sure that we aren't losing out on the soft work. And so, the all hands are a part of that. We also do bi-weekly wine downs where, at 4:30, we all just get on the screen and, with a glass of wine or whatever and chit chat. Those are some of the ways that we've decided to address soft work. But I do understand this idea that like there is some amount of good that comes out of having people just get to know each other, not talk about the spreadsheet, not talk about the
Mm-hmm.
meeting, but just chat about, chat with each other. Another thing that I personally do is at the top of each meeting, we talk about departmental wins, but we also do personal wins. So just like what's one
Mm-hmm.
thing in your week that went right for you that you're excited about, right? That's another thing that we do that I consider soft work. And I have a lot of those little things, but we've been purposeful about it because I believe the soft work does matter. I don't think that I need to put everybody in an office 5 days a week for us to get that soft work and the benefits of that soft work. But I do think it matters. So I am, I empathize with this explanation. I get this one.
Yeah, I think we do this at Nest pretty well. Like we have quarterly summits, in-person summits. It's 1 week. It does suck for that week, in my opinion, to have to leave my son. I don't like that, but I do find it worth it because that's where the soft work happens.
Right.
Particularly in my role in legal, where I need people to know that they can come to me for anything. I have a very cross-functional role. It is really important that people know who I am and like trust me. Mm-hmm. And trust takes time, right? And trust takes a lot of this soft work.
Yeah.
And so I found like those quarterly summits to be really invaluable.
Yeah.
We also have, there's a Slack like add-in feature or whatever called donut chats. Do you guys use these?
No, I've never even heard of this.
Yeah, I think, is that what it's called? An add-in? I don't know, whatever. A plugin. Oh my God. Mm-hmm. I think it's a plugin where, you just, I don't know if it costs us money. I actually have no idea. But if you deploy it, it basically assigns randomized pairings every week, and says like, you Daniela, you're paired with KJ this week. Like, set up a time to just chat.
Oh, I hate this.
Okay, so this is what's really funny.
I hate that.
So people at Nest love it. And I have withdrawn from it just because. No, not because. The thing is, in theory, I do love it. I think it's important. I think it, particularly for some of the pairings where it's like the more senior employees with like junior employees who aren't like connecting on a day-to-day basis. Like I think it's nice to establish those connections. Yeah. The reason why I opted out is because I always found myself rescheduling them because like something else needed to get done. And then I'm like, well, now I'm just being rude. Mm-hmm. So that's the worst thing I can do is like agree to meet with someone and then be like, I need to get something to Derek. So actually we're, so I have withdrawn, but people do love them at Ness. Why do you hate them?
Oh my God. Well, let me just say this. I'll give you 2 reasons why. One, when I was in business school, so, I went to Harvard Business School, our sections are 90 people. That's a lot of people. And so this idea essentially popped up. I'm sure it pops up in every section, right? Like, like 2 people randomly assigned every week to meet up. So like every week for a month, like you're supposed to meet up with just another randomly assigned person. Those were the most awkward coffee chat lunches of all time. And I think maybe part of it is because I am such an extrovert. Like I can meet people. Okay. Right. I can walk into a room of folks I don't know. I did it recently. I was at this really great founder event. I left with 10 new friends. Okay. That is, I don't need help. Right. And so, but if you just sit me down and force me to talk to somebody who maybe I would never talk to, I mean, I don't know, that maybe that makes me sound like a terrible person, but it was just very awkward. I did not like it. Okay. So that's one example.
Now, but what if you were automatically given a topic to start with? No. Would that help? No.
I'm sure it would help pass the time, but it would not make me like more excited about it. Okay. So that's that. And then the other example is, I think I've talked about on this show before, I do 360 reviews. Yeah. So where my team can review me. And one piece of feedback I got a couple years ago was like, people were like, I don't feel like I see KJ, or I don't feel like I talk to her, or whatever. And so I, at my board suggestion, set up coffee chats, basically this donut chat thing, right? And like, now I made it like, these are my times, just sign up for time with me. Nobody signed up for time. No one, not like literally, and I did it for weeks. Nobody signed up for time. And so, and I had blocked, a little hour on my calendar. Like,
you had office hours.
Yeah. No one signed up. And when I checked in later, it's like, look, guys, no one has signed up for this. So I'm starting to take a little bit of offense. I didn't say that, but I'm like, so you don't want to meet with me? And everyone was just like, no, but KJ, like we kind of feel like we see you all the time. And I was like, well, somebody told Somebody said in my reviews that
Right.
y'all don't see me enough. So anyway, so then I stopped doing that. And now, I mean, I do honestly feel like I see everyone on my team all the time. And would be happy to see them even more if they wanted to. But yeah, this like forced like one-on-one, I'm just like, no, like, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's awkward. Like I hope now at this point, and I've talked about this before, I haven't always been a good CEO. I think I'm a much better one now. I hope people just would feel comfortable putting time on my calendar and not have to be like randomly selected to meet with me on any given day. So yeah, I don't love it, but
Do you think your perspective would be different, although it sounds like maybe not because you hated it in business school, but if you weren't the CEO? Like, do you want, I guess, do you care at all whether your like product person is driving with your like customer support person?
I do care, but they do that on their own. Almost
Mm-hmm.
every single one of my departments has a weekly or biweekly touch base with the other department because they recognize that they need it. My retail
Mm-hmm.
folks meet with my marketing folks. My marketing folks meet with my ops folks. My ops folks meet with my finance folks. And they said I did not set up any of that. That
Do
was
you think the
all that.
soft work is happening in those meetings? I guess that's the
Oh
question.
yeah, 100%, 100%. And I do think, look, part of what we're saying, I do think we're a bit biased and a bit privileged because we're at startups. I budget, and this I think is actually small for most companies. I budget about $1,000 a person anytime we're doing one of our all hands, right? But there's 10 of us.
Right.
So for me, that's 10K a quarter. If you are Amazon and you got 75,000 folks just in headquarters, I mean, we start talking about astronomical numbers, right? So some of this is the privilege of being a startup, but at the same time, like I actually need all of us to get together. Amazon, I don't think at any point needs all 75,000 of its employees in a room. It's a nice to have, but like not actually that productive. So you could, if you were Amazon, say every quarter or once a year, twice a year, departments will have their own retreats because that's important, or teams or whatever. So, but I do recognize there's some privilege in the size of our companies. I mean, your company's bigger than mine, but it's still not,
No, it's still
100
small,
folks.
still,
Yeah.
mid 30s. And that is one thing I wonder before we get into the insidious group 2 set of reasons. You know, we are at small mission driven companies. And so I think there's some level of commitment to the work. Like there isn't an ability to hide, right?
Yes. Correct.
There's not an ability to hide when you're taking advantage of being from home as there might be in a much bigger company.
Right.
And just the likelihood that someone doesn't care that much about their job is just much greater in a massive company.
Yeah.
And so I can understand if there's a larger percentage of employees at these big companies that maybe are using remote work to be less involved in their job than maybe they would if they were in person. But the numbers still don't lie, in terms of productivity. And I also think at some point when you are a big company, like that's just kind of the name of the game. You can't expect everyone to give their blood, sweat, and tears as the CEO of ClearLink, this company that's gotten a lot of heat recently for the CEO's comments on return to work. You can't expect that of everyone when you're a massive company. You're not compensating them for their blood, sweat, and tears. You're compensating them, but not to give their life to the company.
Right.
Not enough is the point.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Okay, so on to group 2. The insidious reasons. What do you think?
All right. So I think if you really want to understand why companies are forcing return to office, you have to ask who truly benefits from having employees back in the office and who has benefited most from working remotely.
Mm-hmm.
To this end, there's a really great article in Business Insider by a woman named Ati Iko. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. And she digs into these questions really brilliantly. So the article is titled, "The Real Reason Bosses Are Freaked Out by Remote Work." And I just want to read a bit of this for you because I think she's out here making some great points.
Okay.
She writes, Jamie Dimon, and that, by the way, is the CEO of JP Morgan. Jamie Dimon declared that working from home doesn't work for those who want to hustle. Elon Musk demanded that employees commit to an extremely hardcore schedule consisting of long hours at high intensity. And in a recent op-ed article in the New York Times, the finance executive and professional blowhard, Steven Rattner, railed against working from home as evidence that America has gone soft. I mean, they might as well just say it. They think working from home is for sissies. Even after their employees proved they could work just fine away from the office, the country's old, white, male CEOs want to go back to the way things were. And the old way was clear. The office is for work and the home is for, well, for whatever unpaid stuff it is that women do while their men are at work.
Ooh.
Now,
Spicy.
I think she is spot on. And I think that white men more broadly, but white men more specifically, are the main ones who benefit from return to the office. And here's why.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, as we know, women take on the lion's share of housework and child work. This is still true today in 2023. Yes, we've made some strides, and that is not true in my household, but generally speaking, we know that this is still true, right? So with work from home, the flexible schedules that women had meant that even while they were still taking on more of that house care, more of that child care, they no longer had to take as big of a step back from career and professional life in order to do it. So if you're working in an office and you're the main person who handles pickup, who handles drop off, when daycare calls and says the kid is sick, you're the main one who runs out, picks up the kid. Okay. All of that might still be true in the midst of the pandemic, but now a lot of that can be done without you having to take a step back from work, right? You can do pickup at 4:30, which is what I do, come back, be back online before anyone even knows. My daycare's 7 minutes away, right? You can be the person who has to take care of it when the kid is sick, who gets the call and then drops the kid off at grandma's or whatever. And all of that's done without you even really having to step away. Okay. So you used to have to take a step back from your work in order to deal with family life and kid life and whatever. Now, maybe not so much. And of course, I don't want to misspeak here and make it seem as though women didn't have to take a step back in the pandemic. We all know that a number of women did, but a lot of that was because kids were not in school. So now that kids are back in school, you're seeing women be able to thrive in ways that they haven't. And actually, I spoke about this on my TikTok, and I had a comment from one woman say their company their hiring of women is up 20% in the last 2 years, right? And that makes sense. And she said her company is fully remote. That makes sense. So I think women benefited the most from this. On the flip side, men in a work from home environment, you used to be able to say, oh, I got to be in the office late. Okay, but now you don't got to be in the office late, right? You're at home. I'm at home. You're at home. So you too can participate in bath time. You too can participate in bedtime. You too can walk your happy ass over there and figure out laundry, right? So women in the pandemic and with work from home have been able to make gains. And I feel like for men, they're like, well, the office used to be sort of my escape in some ways, and it doesn't get to be that anymore. I absolutely think that is at play here for why so many of these men want to return to the office.
Yeah, I take issue with this initial premise that to hustle, you need to be in person. I can work late from home. What about being at home means I can't work late? I worked insane hours at Wells Fargo, okay? Actually, part of the reason why I left Wells Fargo is because I was working way too much because I didn't have the commuting hours to reset my head. I was working nonstop at that place, okay? Yeah. And I hustle hard at Nest too, right? So I just think that this idea that you can't get work done remotely is so dated. Aren't we past that in 2023.
100,000%, which is why I think these other reasons are the real reasons, because we've all seen people do the work.
Right.
We've seen it with our own eyes, and we've been the people staying up late or working on the weekend or whatever, working through lunch or whatever. So that can't be real. It's what they're saying. It can't be.
I have another feeling on this, which is because I also have been the person who has worked until 2 a.m. in the office ordering late night dinner with my fellow associates, like when I was at the law firm at Davis Polk. Like, you know, I have some fond memories because I did like my colleagues, right? Even though at the time I wanted to be home, like I look back and I'm like, oh man, those were the days when we were in the trenches, you know? I get that. But to me, I think you need that when the work itself isn't that interesting. And like, I don't need that at Ness because I just like the work I'm doing, you know? Like, I feel like you need those bonding memories and the like that in the trenches feeling when the work in and of itself is otherwise like dull.
That is such a good point. And it reminds me of our quiet quitting episode, because do you know what I think a lot of these bosses are actually scared of? Like, they are scared that without everyone in the office together and like showing off how hard they're working and how much they're working, too many people are going to start to be like, this is some bullshit. And in fact, why am I working this hard? Right. You know, like if you really take a step back, I mean, I am working hard and I am getting things done, but like, should I be? Right? Like, should I be taking a step back? And the truth is, like you said, if the work is dull and not that important and not that interesting, maybe they should be. And maybe that's on you for not giving your teams and your employees enough of a mission to get excited about. But that, I think, absolutely is what these CEOs are scared about, or at least one of the things that they're scared about is, you know, the jig is going to be up. If these folks stay at home too long, they're going to start to realize there's no reason for me to be out here hustling, like in office or out of office. Like, I do think that's part of it. And I'll also just say, you know, because we spoke about the male piece of it, male versus female, but I think the white man piece of it, I don't want to leave that out, because I will just say, I think people of color have often been on the outside when it comes to networking. And I think a lot of, as we said, soft work, a lot of what happens in the office is not just the typing in the spreadsheets. It is the soft work. It's the hobnobbing. It's the FaceTiming. It's the water cool chit chat, blah, 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 blah. People of color have often been on the outside of that. Well, now that we're working from home, that is not happening as often. There aren't as many ways for me to be left out of as many conversations about last night's football game or whatever. Or golf or whatever it might be. And that means I am able to be judged much more on the quality of my work and the output of my work, and not on, oh, do I like speaking with KJ about XYZ? You know, because chances are, if you're a 60-year-old white guy, you and I might not have that many things for us to chat about. And now that doesn't matter as much. So I obviously no one would ever say this. None of these CEOs would ever say this, but I do think you see a lot of these white male CEOs realizing the power imbalance is shifting. And I don't
do you think they're calling for return to the office because they want the power and they want the power distribution to shift back to, like, okay, do you think they want the power distribution to shift back to keep those who had less power down, or do you think it's more about maintaining their own power? You know, like the reason why they got to this executive level is not just because of whatever output in terms of, you know, numbers, but because they also did all this politicking and hobnobbing and whatever. And now that they don't have this in-person factor, they're losing some of that juice. Like, I think it's probably more that than keeping people down, but it's equally as bad because it's ultimately like you want the power imbalance to be what it was.
Exactly. I think it's both, and I think one necessitates the other. They aren't thinking about it as I want to keep the black people down, the blacks and the browns down, but I don't even know that they're consciously thinking about it at all. But look, Did this Clearlink CEO who you cited, he talked about, equity and inclusion and essentially how unnecessary it is. Elon Musk cut the entire DEI team from the entire, literally top to bottom, the entire DEI team. I think, again, this is why it's insidious. They're never going to say it and they would never admit to it. But I do think that a lot of these white male CEOs want things to go back to the way they were. Because when things were the way they were, it was easier for you, even if you were a mediocre white guy, to hobnob your way to the top. Now it's not as easy. And I think people, were comfortable with the way things were. I mean, it's the way, it's always the people who are on top who fight the most against progress, right?
Yeah.
Always. And I don't think this situation is any different.
Yeah. In law, there's this concept of discriminatory intent versus disparate impact, right? And you can have a policy or a practice that may not have overt discriminatory intent, but nevertheless has disparate impact. Mm-hmm. And I think that is probably, what's at play here, if not maybe even some overt discriminatory impact, which should, is more unfortunate. But yeah, that makes sense to me.
I also just feel like it is so wild to me that if you are a Jamie Dimon, if you are a Jeff Bezos or a Mark Benioff or whomever, you can look in the face of all of this data, not only that people are being more productive, but also that women and people of color are being more successful, are rising the corporate ladder, have better work-life balance, which, by the way, all these people have sat on panels before and talked about work-life balance and all of this. It's actually happening. We've actually started doing it. And you're going to get up and say, you have to get back to the office 5 days a week because we have to hustle, we have to grind. This is the only way, this is the only way forward. You're actually going to, out of your mouth, say that when we have started to make real progress on something that we've all been talking about for decades. That is so completely wild to me, and I just have no respect for that.
Right. And it really doesn't make sense that it needs to be 5 days a week. Why? Why 5 days? 2 days seems like that would be fine. You'd get the soft work, 2 days. And if most employees are actually interested in hybrid, even if they mean something different when they say hybrid, why not that? Does 5 days? That can't be right.
Yeah. Yeah. I also want to call out the fact that I don't know if you saw when Facebook did its latest round of mass layoffs, because now they've done 2, or they're in the midst of another one. One of the things that Zuckerberg said in his letter was that they were going to cut a bunch of essentially mid-level managers. So Zuck wrote a letter to employees in March and said, "It's well understood that every layer of a hierarchy adds latency and risk aversion in information flow and decision making. Every manager typically reviews work and polishes off some rough edges before sending it further up the chain. In our year of efficiency," this is a term he has coined, "in our year of efficiency, we will make our organization flatter by removing multiple layers of management." I think this is actually, and he actually then goes on to essentially say, gives his indictment of work from home culture. But I actually think this point right here about middle managers and essentially the fact that they're bloated and they don't need all of these guys, you could argue that in a remote environment, it becomes much clearer who's actually adding value, right? Because when you're in office, you can just keep getting people in rooms and you can keep looking over shoulders and you can keep popping up to your senior manager, popping in their office to say, "Hey, I wanted to, run this by you, or I wanted to show you this quick thing." But you could look very busy just by being present and going and doing, right?
Walking with energy.
Walking with energy, popping into people's cubicles, whatever. And we all have known managers like this, but who are not actually adding value. And I think part of the reason Zuck has even been able to start to flatten the organization is because it is much clearer in a work from home environment who's actually adding value. Much clearer. But again, who benefited the most from this walk with energy policy? The white men. Okay, because they felt the most comfortable walking up to anybody and everybody, in the hallways
Right.
and doing whatever. So again, I think it's laying some things bare that, the powers that be don't necessarily want laid bare.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. What else in your group too?
Well, I will say the last thing that, at least to me, that I would bring up, or actually, second to last thing is you do have to think about the commercial real estate of it all.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that this reason is so. I almost don't even like to talk about it. I get it. You signed a 20-year lease and now your office is sitting empty. And so you feel like that is unproductive and that, okay. But my thing is, like, if you've already signed the lease, that's a sunk cost. Okay. You already signed the lease and you can't get out of it. That's a sunk cost. It doesn't become cheaper because now you've got butts and seats. In fact, you spend more money when you start putting butts in seats, right? Because now you have to pay for the utilities and the paper towels and the toilet paper and the pens and the printer paper and the blah 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 that you wouldn't have to pay for if nobody was in there, right? You would just be on the hook for the lease, not all the other stuff. So, but I do think that's part of it. I think people don't like seeing that on their P&L every month, the $500,000 a month they're spending, and no one's in the office. I do think that that's a real reason.
Well, do you think it's also fending off, though, just like economic recession, collapse from what the like commercial real estate market will experience if those leases don't get renewed? And like what that will do to cities, to American cities? Because that's what I think. Like there's so much in New York beyond just, the banking industry and like work culture. There's more that the city has to offer. But that said, there are a lot of commercial real estate buildings.
Right.
And I don't know what happens to New York City if those buildings aren't filled.
So, yes, I think that is a real concern. I think that is a real concern for governments, more so than the average CEO, right? Now, Jamie Dimon is not an average CEO. He cares very much about what happens in the broader real estate market and economy,
just the broader
right?
macroeconomic.
Yeah. Okay. But like, someone who's running a mid-sized 100-person office out of Columbus, Ohio, I don't know that he's given that much thought to what happens
I totally
if I
agree
let go
with
of my
that.
lease?
Right. I agree with that. But I do wonder if the CEOs of the biggest companies who have maybe the most wealth to lose if the macroeconomic environment takes a huge dive, and probably who have investments in commercial real estate and whatever else, like personal interests, are trying to preserve or fend off a steeper, quicker collapse.
And I think I can buy that, but I still feel like, why wouldn't we use this opportunity we've been given where we've learned that there is a new way of working that actually works to figure out a new way of utilizing these spaces?
So that is my exact, yes, I agree with that. Like, if that is the reason, that shouldn't be, because you can't fight this forever.
Right.
Like, you can't fight it forever. Like, let's find the new use for that space,
Right.
Yeah.
It's like when, women started working and entered the workforce.
Right.
That meant we had to come up with new ways for childcare. And America still is far behind where it should be on that.
Right.
But obviously, like, things like daycare expanded, nanny services expanded. Like, we rose to the occasion to meet the increased need for childcare. And that was a huge change in the workforce, women working, a huge change. Right. And yet we didn't go backwards. We didn't say, let's get them out of here. War's over. Get rid of the women. I think you have to, you got to meet the occasion where it is. So that's the second to last thing. The last thing I will say, and this is conjecture, but it's all conjecture, really. Again, I mentioned I posted on this about this on TikTok, and one of the videos has a ton of comments. I was surprised by how much it took off. And one of the users commented, her name was Jennifer. She commented, most of them, and by them she meant, the male CEOs, most of them hate their home lives and families so much that their office is their retreat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I am not going to say that most men hate their home lives, right?
Right.
But do I think a significant number of these men think about the office as a retreat from work? 100,000%. So I will just say my experience, right? Before I started Minted, I was a management consultant. And I hated traveling. I hated it so much. I would cry every Sunday night before I, woke up at 4 a.m. for my flight Monday morning. And I just didn't understand how people did it for years. I was a consultant for 2 years and it nearly broke me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who do consulting for 20 years, 30, 40, and so I would ask the partners on my projects, how do you do this? How do you do this? Right. And there were so many times where the men on my projects would say, I actually love being away from home, and so does my wife, because absence makes the heart grow fonder. And, by the time Sunday comes, she's kicking me out of the house. She doesn't want me there anymore. First of all, I think that's bullshit. Second of all, what we're really saying here is you don't like to be at home.
Right.
You don't like to be at home. And so this career is perfect for you because then you only have to be at home 3 days a week.
I remember talking to a mentor who was considering taking a job that would require this person to travel to this job, right? It was out of their home city, and for a number of reasons they didn't want to change their kids' schools, so they were going to be traveling basically I think it was going to be Sunday to like Thursday midday. And I remember this mentor was saying, that could be good because it'll enable me to like focus on work when I'm at work. And then when I'm home, I'm really home. And my response was like, so for however long you're going to have this job, let's say you're going to stay at this company for 10 years, because this company was known for keeping people a really long time. You are accepting that you are going to miss 4 to 5/7 of your kid's life or kids' lives. I mean, I know people work long hours, but like the occasional seeing them before school at breakfast, or, you're not necessarily going to be in the office every single day if, till super late. I just like to commit to missing 4 to 5/7, okay, give or take because of vacations, whatever, of your kids' lives at that. And my mentor was like, oh, when you put it that way, that feels really wrong. And I was like, yeah, it does, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah,
but some people are fine with it. And that is crazy to me. Yeah.
And the thing is, like, and I don't mean to indict anyone who, if that works for you and that works for your family, fine. But right. I think to take that mindset of, for me, work is a retreat from a home life I'm trying to avoid, and as a result, you need to come into the office 5 days a week. That is what really pisses me off. If it works for you, it works for you. But don't, as a result of that, force everybody else to be in the office. I just think that's crazy. I think it's insidious. I think it is people wanting things to go back the way they were so that they can have air cover, right? Like, oh, I'm in the office all these hours because I have to be. I'm not spending time with you because I can't. I, got ahead of my own, of my own ability, not because I chit chat and stop and talk with Mark every other day, and pop into his office. People want that air cover. And I think work from home removed that cover for a lot of people. And they're like, I want it back. And I don't respect that.
I agree. All right. Shall we move into the verdict?
Let's do it. What about you? Let's start with you. What's your verdict here?
I ultimately think that CEOs, if they truly believe this is necessary, and if there is in fact data, let's take CEOs who have reported that this is necessary and merit and is appropriate given their internal data. Okay. Do hybrid. Pick 2 days out of the week where everyone has to be in the office the same 2 days, and then let everyone enjoy the other 3 days at home. Yeah. And see if that improves your productivity. and then see if it's necessary to really bring people the third day, the fourth day, or the fifth day. It just doesn't make sense to me to go from fully remote to 5 days a week. I don't buy that at all.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I guess my verdict is I just want to see the actual data, the real studies behind making this switch. Because all of the data I've seen, all of the studies and reporting I've seen has said that work from home works. And so to me, I can't respect people citing some bullshit hustle culture grind set nonsense as their reasoning for forcing people to upend their lives. And at this point, that's what you're doing. People have gotten to a point where they have formed their lives around what they're doing now. So you're talking about making people move. You're talking about making people pay for very expensive childcare that maybe they weren't having to pay for before. You're talking about, from a commute perspective, thousands of extra dollars a month that people are having to spend in order to commute. That is real life changing stuff. So before you do it, I just think you've got to come with the data, and I haven't seen anyone do it yet. And I just can't respect it. I can't.
I will respond very quickly to, I do want to say, like, employers do not owe employment to their employees, right? We have at-will employment in the US. Like, employers don't owe people jobs. However, it is a bad business choice to make your employees unhappy. Like, not every company is going to follow these other companies' leads and bring everyone back to the office. So you are really risking employees saying, no, I took this job thinking it was going to be fully remote and that's what I want. And so I'm going to go to this other company. So you really better believe, if you're not going to share the data, fine, but you better believe that it is true, because otherwise I think you're really risking the future of your business.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, it's time for Judge and Jury. And this week we're talking about the Love is Blind reunion, because that's what the entire world, rightfully so, is talking about. KJ, tell us what happened with the Love is Blind reunion. Season 4.
Yes. In case you're not a Love is Blind fan, this is a reality show on Netflix where couples date without ever seeing each other, and then they get engaged sight unseen, okay? So the big conceit is, will they actually go through with the marriage once they've seen each other and lived with each other for a few weeks, all right? That's the show. Anyway, Netflix decided to host the reunion show live, which I don't think Netflix has ever done. At least I had never heard of it, right? This whole thing is it's streaming on demand, but they decided to host the reunion show live. It was supposed to happen this past Sunday. They promoted it for weeks. And then when Sunday came, and mind you, I had my popcorn, I was on the couch, I was ready, I had my glass of wine, I was ready, okay? In the end, they had so many viewers that their servers couldn't handle it, and essentially it didn't happen. It did not happen live, right? Of course, this caused a ton of outrage. People were pissed, people were tweeting and TikToking and everything else. Now, what I would like to say for Judge and Jury, though, is, was it a good or bad decision to do it live? Taking out the fact that, yes, they botched it. Yes, we know they botched it, okay? However, they did succeed in creating a ton of buzz and getting a lot of butts in seats at a specific time for the Sunday evening viewing. So in a world where they hadn't botched it, okay, let's put ourselves in a world where it actually did go live. Do we think it's just even a good idea for Netflix to try and enter the live television programming game with an event like this? Good or bad judgment? What's your thoughts?
Well, can I ask a question? Like, what's the point? I don't get it. Is it to, like, you're not having commercials during that live event? Like, why do you need that? Is it because you're creating more of a cultural moment and so you're going to get more people, like, watching Love is Blind than you previously would? I don't even know if I understand the goal.
Well, that I think is the exact question in terms of, is it good or bad judgment? Because I will just say what I personally would argue is that going live at all was a bad decision, even if it had worked exactly the way they wanted it to, because I don't think, I do think the goal probably was to have like a, a moment in time, a big event in time, a Super Bowl sort of event where everyone's sitting down and it's a big cultural moment. We're all tweeting about it at the same time. We're all group chatting about it at the same time. The next morning, a million TikToks are, live about it at the same time. And you feel like you are participating with it as it's happening. I think that
and
was
because
the goal.
it's bigger, and wait, but I need to take this to the next step. And because it then is a bigger moment, then more people end up subscribing to Netflix. Like a Super Bowl moment, the whole point is the commercials,
Right.
and people pay for the commercials. We're
Well,
not having commercials, so I guess what is the like what's the end game?
Yeah. I mean, I think you saying the whole point is the commercials is spoken like a non-sports fan, but I
No, but I mean,
you mean like from a business perspective.
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it draws that many eyeballs,
Right.
and so it's a chance to make a ton of money. Yeah. It's a good question, but to me it underscores why this, to me, I think was bad judgment, because you're not getting that Super Bowl payoff, right, from an
Right.
advertising perspective, but also all of the things that would make it a big moment on a Sunday evening would still make it a big moment if you dropped the episode at 8 p.m. on a Sunday evening.
Correct.
The way Succession does. Like every Sunday night at 9 p.m., Twitter is filled with tweets about Succession. It's not live,
Right.
but it is dropped at a certain time and everyone sits down and watches it together. And I think a lot of us would have done that for the Love is Blind reunion anyway, because no one wants to wake up and see spoilers on the timeline.
Correct.
You want to experience it while it's fresh. So I think the decision, even if it had gone off without a hitch, was bad, not just because of the advertising piece, but because, as you and I know, as Real Housewives and Bravo fans, reunions, they take time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they take time, and clearly nobody consulted with Andy Cohen over at Bravo,
Correct.
because when you have that many different people in a room and that many different things that have happened over the course of the last year and that many different opinions, it takes time to dig the juiciest bits out and then to hand it over to the editors to make sure that we are seeing just the juiciest bits. Like, that is a craft, that is a skill, and I just think we lost out by a lot. What we finally did get, I think, was way worse than it could have been had they just taped it like a regular reunion.
Yeah, I think so. I needed to ask my question because I felt like maybe I was missing the plot, like maybe I was missing the end game, but it doesn't sound like I am. And so I will agree with you. It's bad judgment, and I think it reflects the missing link for Netflix more holistically, which is content first. Okay, a better reunion would have been a recorded reunion.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
When they first announced this, I think I texted you, this is going to be bad because Nick and Vanessa Lachey are not that good at this.
No.
Like, they think they're amazing, especially Vanessa. She thinks she's just getting in there and really just, conveying the audience's ire with every individual cast member, and she's the people. Like, Vanessa, you're okay. There are hosts of reunion shows who've been worse, but you're not Andy Cohen. That's for goddamn sure. And you're not Oprah, or as you said, you're none of these interviewers. It is a real skill to interview. And I'm sure it takes Andy many times to ask the same question, get the answer he wants, double click into a response, right?
Yes.
Like, Nick and Vanessa are not that good at this. No prior reunion has been that good. So to say, like, we're going to add in an element, live TV, which makes it harder to interview, you're certainly going to end up with a worse reunion.
Yes.
And so, once again, you missed the key thing. Content has to be good.
Yeah, they failed. They flopped.
Netflix, please, because I do love Love is Blind, okay?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to, you get credit for the show to begin with. I will watch season 5. I will watch season 6. I'll probably watch this I've been watching Housewives for over a decade. So, like, I will watch this for a good portion of my life.
Yeah.
Make the reunion 3 episodes long, okay? Record it over a day, make people tired so that they start becoming a little bit more willing to share.
Yes.
You know, all the tactics that you use to get people to propose in the pods.
I know.
Deploy that to your reunion.
Do that, okay? And get rid
Right.
of Nick and Vanessa. I'm sorry it sounds harsh, but they're not.
Or just
bad.
prep them. They have, you know, give them some time. Prep them. Prep them a little bit better. No?
Nah, I think they gotta go. We've given them 4 takes at it. Four shots is enough. They gotta
They're
go.
not horrible. They're just not great. And it's you think they're horrible. Okay.
I think
all right,
I
well,
think they're horrible.
all right.
They're fine at the stuff during the season where all they have to do is introduce people and
Right.
things. But no, like we have learned that it is a tough thing to do to host and run a reunion, and they have had 4 chances to get it right, and they are not good at it. It's time. It's time. So
There you have it, folks.
Bad judgment.
Bad judgment.
All right, folks, that is it for this week. We hope you are loving the show. And if you are, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review.
And be sure to follow us on social. You heard our podcast social at the top, but you can also follow us personally. I'm Danny_D_MC on TikTok, and KJ is IM_KJ Miller.